Welcome to another episode of Uncommon Entrepreneurs Lunch and Learns. Here today with an uncommon entrepreneur, MariAngie Rosas. Yes. And we're here in beautiful Haus coworking space, which she owns and operates, and we'll be getting into that. If you're tuning in for the first time, we're in sunny Puerto Rico, where there's just many sharp entrepreneurs, as you'll see in our other catalog, and we're just interviewing people that are solution-based, that are thinking of ways of being creative in this time of complete reset in the world, and just highlighting people that are resilient like MariAngie. So getting into her background, she has a background in having other startups and was an architect in New York City, grew up here in Puerto Rico, went to Ithaca College, just has a background, and then now she's owning and operating one of the co-working spaces that's the heartbeat of the local ecosystem down here. So welcome. Appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Drew. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's get into a little bit more of like where you come from to give some people some context, and just maybe, how you were raised and how you got to where you're at.
Right. So I was born and raised in Maya, Puerto Rico, which is on the West Coast. My dad used to work at the university. He was a dean of the business school before I was born. So education was a huge thing in my family. Like everyone had to go to college. So for me, that was a no-brainer. But in my family, everyone's a bit of an entrepreneur. So I always had that. My two brothers are entrepreneurs. My dad is an entrepreneur. So to me, I didn't know what that word meant, but I kind of knew that in the future, I would end up kind of being my own boss.
Sure.
But I wanted to pursue architecture as a career. I loved design. I loved buildings. And, my dad's advice was not to do it. He thought that it wasn't, the most lucrative business. And, but it was still something that I wanted to do, and I'm so glad I did, because the methodology that's taught in architecture, that design thinking process, literally where you resolve problems through designing solutions, it's, I think, one of the best educations for an entrepreneur. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was like, it was just kind of the best alternative to going to business school in a way. After graduating, I moved to New York, where I worked as an architect for different size companies, like very different size companies, from like the 2-person where I was just the second, the first employee, to like the 300-person firm. So it was interesting. I got to work on a lot of different kinds of projects, residential. Actually, I worked on District Live, which is one of the new developments here in Puerto Rico that was done by an architect that was actually living in New York at the time, the first schematic designs. And so I just knew after a while that something was calling me back, but I honestly knew architecture was not going to be a part of that.
Coming back to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, coming back to Puerto Rico. And to be honest, it was a few friends of mine that were living in New York at the same time that I was, who moved a lot earlier than me, and they had arrived to New York kind of even later than me because they were a little bit younger, that inspired me. One of those people is Cristina Sumasa, who owns Lotte. We are really good friends. We're both from Maya West. We've known each other our whole lives. And she moved back, with this vision of, giving back and being kind of part of that solution that would change Puerto Rico. And that was kind of super inspiring. So it got me kind of thinking about it. And my family, who is in real estate and commercial real estate specifically, and a few other partners, we decided to buy Cobian's Plaza, the commercial area, back in 2014. And that was, I had been in New York for 6 years, 5 years at the time. And I was like, okay, this is enough of a size, like a nice size project or venture to get me to come back. Because by then my dad was retired. There was nothing for me to do to work with him. And I still had no idea what to do. And I didn't want to just move without a plan.
Purpose, yeah.
So I still had no idea that I wanted to become an entrepreneur, that I want to, it was more of a, let's, move down there. Let's start, working things around. I thought I was going to get into real estate, like becoming a real estate broker.
Got it.
And I got the course for that, and the license. And then I was like, that's not for me. the startup ecosystem was really at its like very inception, and I started to see that, and I saw, I'm a huge fan of podcasts, so I knew about.
Yeah.
I knew about that world. I knew about Y Combinator before P18 started, but the moment that P18 opened, I knew what it was. And so I was like, oh my God, this is exciting. This is amazing. And I started to think, wait, what if I start my own startup? Like, what if I just, instead of thinking of more traditional paths, like think of something that I'm really passionate about. I love food and I love travel. And I always had a very hard time finding the best food when traveling.
Yeah.
So that was my, go-to. And I was like, I'm going to start this company that's going to create an app.
Sure.
And it had a million different versions of what that was going to be before it even existed. But I started kind of thinking that and moving in the startup world here locally and meeting everyone, talking to people. I got into a coding school so that I could learn at least the very basics of coding to understand how to speak to other developers.
Sure.
And I kind of noticed that there weren't in any co-working space, or very few co-working spaces. There weren't any in Santurce, which is the biggest part, like the most dense part of San Juan.
Sure.
At the time, there was one in Bayamon and Jingfor. There was Piloto in Old San Juan, but that was pretty much it. And so I really wanted there to be a co-working space here in Cobians. This is a very iconic building. It's a big building with a lot of parking. So the location made sense. And so I was interested in other people coming here.
Sure.
I pitched to WeWork. I pitched to other local, co-working spaces for them to move here. And for multiple reasons, it didn't pan out. And that kind of stuck there. And so when the opportunity came about, I actually started Cocoa Haus with a co-founder.
Okay.
And it was kind of her idea at first to start a co-working space in a different industry. Mm-hmm. And when we kind of talked about it at the opening of Lotte 23, going kind of full circle on that story, it was the opening night of Lotte, and her name's Carolyn. We started talking, and I was like, if we do it not industry specific, if we do it for just entrepreneurs, I'm in, and I can, I know the exact office. This office had just opened up. It wasn't abandoned like most of the building was, where it needed a lot of construction. So this had just been, the lease had ended and the people had moved out. And I was like, this is a perfect little, it was very small, and that was on purpose. Yeah. It was supposed to be our side project for both of us. And that's how Cocoa Haus came about.
Interesting. And what year was this?
We opened our doors April 5th of 2017.
Okay.
And we kind of started working it in December. So in 3 months, we kind of made it happen.
Got it. And so during this time, you're going through pre-18, was it?
No, so pre-18 hadn't launched yet, because pre-18 is a result of the hurricane. So
got it.
Fast forward, 5 months after we open in September, that's when, first in August, that's where Irma hit, and Maria in September. And, total devastation. Yeah. Our space, we were kind of lucky. Mm-hmm. Our generator was a 24/7 generator. Mm-hmm. It didn't, it lasted the whole 3 months that we were without power. Our fiber internet worked flawlessly the whole time. So while 80% of the island didn't have any cell phone connection or internet, we did. So we were able to open 2 days after the hurricane hit, and we became, without ever saying it to anyone, without ever advertising it to anyone, word of mouth. This place filled up overnight, mainly with nonprofits that were working on relief.
Sure.
So we let them work out of the space for 2 weeks, without charging them. We weren't charging for anyone. Like P18, their offices got destroyed, so their headquarter team kind of anchored here for a couple of days while they got things sorted out. The entrepreneurs were able to come here to talk to their families. Some of them, their families weren't here. They hadn't been able to let them know that they were okay. Book flights before the airport closed. A few of them were able to leave the island.
Wow.
So it was a very, kind of interesting time to be in here. No actual work was getting done. It was more about connecting and
serving.
Community. That I wasn't doing it as a community, intentional, but that's kind of how our community kind of came together and just supported each other.
Yeah, how things transitioned from there.
So that's when P18 decided to launch a pre-accelerator program just for Puerto Rico companies. And I was still, with my vision of starting my food startup.
Yeah.
And I went ahead and applied and we got in. And this is now the summer after in 2018.
Okay.
Well, it started in the spring. And I think, unfortunately, it was like as the program was started, my kind of like dream was changing in a little bit because I saw what Cocoa Haus had done, like the community it built and the need for it as part of the ecosystem.
Sure.
And the need for more co-working spaces and more space. We were full, like from that October, we were full like from there on.
Wow.
We just never, I thought that after a few months when things got to get better, like no, like some people would leave, but then others would join. And so I saw the opportunity to grow Cocoa Haus and it wasn't just a financial decision. It was more of like, if we don't really support other entrepreneurs through co-working spaces, like having an office where you can bring your team, where you can have meetings, you don't even need to be here full time, but just to be able to come a couple of days a month to kind of focus and interact with other entrepreneurs, like that's where the magic happens.
Sure.
And it's not about just renting an office space, it's the community. So I was like, if we don't cultivate these networking communities, the ecosystem is never really going to be sustainable. And so I was like, we finished the program. It was the hardest time for me because I was like trying to really focus on two very different models.
Yeah.
And I had, after the hurricane, I kind of became the only owner of Cocoa Haus.
Got it.
And so I was just me for both companies, like, pretty much scaling one and then founding the other one. And I had to come to the hard decision of, this startup, it could be, it can happen in the future. I'm not still
put it on the back burner.
But putting it in the back burner. And we did 18 events in a year, which I thought was awesome. We kind of did December through December so a full year of events. It turned into the Eventbrite of pop-up dinners. That was kind of like the concept of it. It's called Urban Vittles. But yeah, that's when I focused on opening a second location, which is within, 100 feet from here. It's called the Annex. It's in the same floor that we are. And we doubled our square footage and that filled up in just a couple of months.
Wow.
And I just really saw this need. And I was like, okay, our plans now are to kind of, scale Cocoa Haus to whatever level it wants to grow to.
Got it. Interesting. So I think that's a key factor that I could personally relate with, where you're trying to decide what path to go down, and sometimes you're trying to, accomplish multiple things at the same time, and you're not effective in either. How was that decision looking back now, and how would you, people that are tuning in, how would you say that helped?
Hindsight is 20/20, and I have to say my dad is a huge mentor of mine, and I listen to him a lot. But he told me from the very beginning, you can't do all of these things. You need to focus on one. And I thought, no, Urban Vittles can be my hobby. I can dedicate it, a couple hours a week. And no, for you to really, that's why entrepreneurship is so hard. It's like you have to give it your full, 100% of you, because it is, especially now, it's so hard to make a noise with all the sound that's going on. You can have the best idea ever, but if the people don't find out about it, they'll never, know it exists. So it's a lot of trial and error. You can have the best idea also in your head, and until you put it in practice, you then realize that no one else agrees with you. So you need to like pivot or just change and adapt to what the market really wants. And so it's a very frustrating process in a way, but it's also the most gratifying when you actually like make it work and you see like people talking good about your product or good about your service, and like when you hear the word of mouth, and so it's like I wouldn't have it any other way. But I'm 100% sure that I would have still gone through it, because going through the experience of feeling like, okay, this idea makes sense, other people see it, it's a validation. So, and it's a validation as well as a founder, because I think a lot of people don't realize that accelerators and investors are not really looking that much for the idea. They're interested in the founders. So it's also good to know that, I don't know, someone thought that I had what it took.
Yeah, that's good. So I think, co-working spaces play a big factor in kind of a local entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I know that's a passion and kind of one of your reasons behind why you're doing it is you're kind of explaining. Maybe let's get into a little bit more on like how you see, what you're doing in every other, co-working space and how the impact and so forth, the importance.
Right. So I opened Cocoa Haus mainly because of the opportunity, and I thought it was a cool industry to be in.
Yeah.
But I didn't really understand what co-working was until I saw it happening. And it's really not about renting a space. People can work out of coffee shops. People have worked out of Starbucks for decades, and that doesn't make a co-working space. It's the constant. It's the vibe, it's the energy, it's knowing other entrepreneurs that are going through the same thing that you are, that have gone through maybe some of the struggles that you have, so they have an answer, and you can maybe take a shortcut and go straight to the solution for that particular problem. And it doesn't necessarily happen between members. It happens between the client of a member that's visiting, and you get to meet them in the hallway. And literally it sparks a connection, a network, a moment of a potential client. It's like from the moment I open Cocoa Haus, I don't necessarily have to look for solutions. They kind of come to me because they're all in here.
Sure.
And that is the true value of a co-working space. And so as soon as I decide to, shut down Urban Vittles, I got into kind of what the co-working movement. I traveled to Banff, Canada, to go to a convention on co-working, and it blew my mind. That's when I was like, oh, this is intentional. It doesn't also happen by chance. There's a method in which you can make this even more magical, and you can make this 100% all about community and collaboration. And it's collaboration over competition. And so I really got inspired by the movement more than the industry. And I started to really then learn as much as I could about it. I traveled to more conferences on it. I was actually invited to talk about our experience here in Cocoa Haus in Seattle for the Global Co-working Conference.
Okay.
And it was supposed to happen in April.
Sure.
Of course, that got canceled. So the tentative date is October, but that's probably not going to happen.
Got it.
Anytime soon. But the movement is something that's pretty amazing.
Got it. So what makes Cocoa Haus unique?
So Cocoa Haus, the name, it comes from a combination of the Bauhaus and then the tropical climate that we live in Puerto Rico. And I think that's kind of I'm very, as an architect, I like functionality, and I focus a lot on how we can make something very simple but that it works. But we also have that very hospitable, fun kind of dynamic of the tropical. Puerto Rico is a very friendly place, and I think that that's kind of one of the key. Cocoa Haus is pretty relaxed. It's very, community is our biggest focus. So people refer to us for the community more than for the space.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah. Because I know you're saying every co-working space has its own vibe to it, essentially.
Yeah. And actually, this is something that I learned in that conference. Liz Elam, actually the founder of the Global Co-working Conference, she said, it's like an ice cream store. Mm-hmm. There's a flavor for everyone. And the recommendation is that you go and visit every co-working space in the area where you want to work at, so that you can get the vibe, and you'll know after spending a day in a space, you'll kind of know where you fit in. And it's a mutual thing. The community needs to also kind of, because otherwise you're not going to have fun if you don't fit in, and if it's not the space for you. And we don't want you to go through that. For us is also it doesn't work. I'd rather have someone that really wants to be here and wants to engage than just like pay a bill and never come.
Got it. Makes sense. Just like a gym membership or
Exactly.
something.
Like, even though that model works for some people, it's like, it's not what we're about, because it's like, there's more value, to be honest, of being part of the community.
Yeah, interesting. Talk more about that. Maybe some synchronicities that you've seen that come, because it's an intangible that maybe others aren't seeing, that haven't been a part of that, but maybe even people with different industries, how they can impact. What have you seen?
So the most obvious one is how people just collaborate with each other. If you need to, make a video, you would have here someone that can help you with the story, someone that can help you film it, someone that can help you produce it, because there's, someone from almost every industry is represented here. But I think it's, for example, one of our members once told me she's a great brand and graphic designer. She said, before, when I used to work out of an agency, if I ever had to ask for feedback, I was asking my peers. So the feedback was always kind of the same.
Got it.
At Cocoa Haus, I can ask feedback and I'm getting the point of view of a lawyer, of an accountant, of a designer, and of an entrepreneur in some other industry. And she's getting completely different point of views to help her actually, figure out what the best solution for her problem is.
Got it.
And it's, like I said, it's in those connections that I think part of how you get to find mentors and how do you get to network in the industry is more of like having that relationship that develops a little bit over time.
Yeah.
And so it's after being friends with someone at the co-working space, all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I need some advice.
Yeah.
And I can be completely honest
without
ever having to sign an NDA, without ever having to, you can tell them, like, because you already trust them, and that relationship is amazing. And I have many mentors here in Cocoa Haus that are, part of, like, that are people that I constantly go to whenever I'm having a problem, and vice versa. Like, a lot of members see me or people from my staff as like their mentors to, like, go through some certain problems. Sometimes they're even personal. It doesn't have to be 100% about the business, because we are kind of, this sounds super cliche, but it is kind of like a family that you it's a community, which is what it is. Yeah. Community is not you kind of like teaching or like, preaching, telling your point of view. It's like relationship building. It's everyone contributing to the pool.
So you're hitting a very key point, because you're right. Creating a community and having those relationships are so important. What would you say, maybe a tip or two of how you've been able to do that successfully here?
I don't know how to, like, what formula we have, to be honest. It's a struggle, because we're trying to put some of it on paper so that we can have, our kind of like operations, community operations in place so we could scale this. And it is really hard. I think it's a lot of conversation. So I think a lot of our events are very casual. We don't necessarily we do want to, teach entrepreneurs different skills. So we have those type of events like our Cocoa Talks, where we're, bringing in a mentor that's like teaching them something. But I think more than that, it's creating a bit of a social environment. And so it's like the combination of a social club and an entrepreneur club, because it's in those social gatherings that kind of people let go a little bit. We did a lot of our in-person happy hours here in the space that were very casual. We would do them, and we would do bigger ones. We would call them the Cocoa Mixers in different locations around here for other people from the you didn't have to be a member to come to those. We would do them at Lotte 23 or at Cultivo, and we would invite just anyone who wanted to come. And it's a lot of just social engagement. We want to make sure also we provide information and resources for founders on all levels. So we focus a lot on wellness, and we give information on that. We bring resources, because part of the struggles of being an entrepreneur is sometimes you focus 100% on your business and you forget about yourself.
Yeah.
And so making sure that people understand that they need to take care of themselves. And so it's a whole, it's focusing on the founder more than on the ecosystem or on the,
Got it.
yeah,
On the individual.
On the individual.
On the more holistic, like complete life and balance leads to.
Exactly. And we do also, well, again, it's hard because we haven't been able to do any of this, but road trips. We would go chinchorreo, which is going through the mountains, eating, visiting local vendors from around the mountains for food. Going go-kart racing, stuff
Got
like
it.
that. It's about
Team
having
building.
fun and team building without really having an agenda.
Sure.
That's basically.
Yeah, building trust and
Exactly.
friendships, and
Yeah.
which can lead to, like you said, you can approach them without an NDA or get advice and all that. That's critical. Interesting. So switching a little bit to more, we're in the middle of, this COVID scenario, and, commercial real estate's like, a lot of people have question marks, like you're, like you said, part owner in a large commercial real estate building that we're in. Like, where do you see the direction of that going? Where do you see the direction of kind of like co-working and kind of, that whole, office space going?
Right. I 100% believe that the co-working movement is going to have a huge growth after this. We kind of fast forward like 10 years, and experts say this, it's not just me, on the way people work, and it's giving employees the flexibility to
Got
work
it.
from wherever they want. So that is going to be huge. And it's not on the individual level for employees or for freelancers. It's also at the corporate level.
Got it.
So flexible workspaces, where co-working is a part of that. You have your Regis, you have these other companies that have done this for decades, where big corporations would have satellite offices around the world using these services.
Sure.
Well, I think their entire headquarters might become satellites around different cities to give people the flexibility to work from an office that's closer to their home. So I think the corporate, the commercial real estate is definitely, the trend was there before. A lot of commercial real estate were turning into, and they're calling it co-working because I think it's a trendy word, but
Sure.
but a lot of places don't really have any community building. It's just, or any community as part of it. They're just, subletting offices and desks, and there's a huge market for that. There's actually, I'm sure, corporations who would rather have their teams be in a place where there are no distractions.
Sure.
That a community could bring. So I think that the flexibility of commercial real estate is definitely going to be a part of, and we get, there are not a lot of we don't have a local WeWork in town, for example. So I get a lot of inquiries for the enterprise level
Sure.
of flexible, rent. And so, can you accommodate 20 people for 6 months? And I'm like, no, and I'm never going to be able to, even if we scale, because that's never going to be our model. So I think there's definitely a need for just commercial business, the commercial real estate people to turn into flexible workspace.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. So, because it gives you more flexibility from a company standpoint where they don't know.
Exactly. I mean, the economy these days is constantly changing. There's a lot of, whether it's man-made or like natural disasters happening, companies can grow or shrink. I mean, look at what Airbnb had to go through. Like, I'm pretty sure no one was expecting that company to shrink as much as it's doing. It's not going out of business, but if they had I'm sure they probably had a huge headquarters. What are they going to do with all that extra space? So I'm sure that a lot of companies, as they scale, they're going to always want to have, even though it costs more money, temporarily to be in a flexible space, in the long run, it probably will save the company a lot of money, because any month or after your contract is done, you can very easily, without having to invest in anything, just move out, grow, shrink, whatever it is that your business has to do. Have offices anywhere in the world, satellite offices around the world. It's going to be so easy to, and that's where I think corporate flexible spaces are great at, because they provide consistency. A company will probably love to, have a contract with WeWork where they know everything is going to be the same no matter in what city, their offices are at.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. That consistency across is everything. So maybe pivoting a little bit more to kind of like your mentality. How would you define an entrepreneur?
Someone that takes risks. I think it's not starting your own business if there's a very cookie cutter model to follow. So I don't see it as you can be an independent worker and work for yourself, but if you're following an industry that it's the model already exists, I mean you are being an entrepreneur in a way, but I think the true entrepreneurial mindset comes from someone that's really trying to figure out new solutions to a problem that no one has tried to fix before, or doing it in a different way, or even if it's a problem that already exists, you want to make it better, and it's still such a new thing that you don't have a playbook to follow. You're kind of learning as you go.
Got it. Makes sense. And a term I'm hearing clearly through your story is resilience has played a big factor, right? And we've dealt with, the hurricanes, the earthquakes, the political unrest with, the governor, and then, now COVID and so forth. So you've dealt with that throughout the time of just starting this. Yeah, it's like, curveballs. What would you say somebody out there that's maybe, facing similar challenges and seeing you stand up and overcome, how have you done it? How would you encourage them? What would you say?
Don't give up. I think it's but there's also a huge value in accepting failure, and that's something that I also respect. I don't know, I think you need to have a lot of support. I think that's the biggest thing that I've had that works for me, and it's not confidence in yourself, because I don't have confidence in myself half the time. I think I'm constantly going to fail, but it's my employees, my staff here is amazing, and the amount of dedication and work that they put into what this vision. It's without them, I honestly don't think I could keep doing what I'm doing. It's also, I think, resiliency is something that you just have to, either you do it or you don't.
Sure.
You have there's no middle way or middle ground to fit in. And so you just have to persevere. And what I do know is that I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that this industry will have a big boom in the next, hopefully, couple of months, but it could be a couple of years. And I don't know if we will be able to withstand if it's a couple of years. But so weathering the storm is the most that you can do. And I think that we keep weathering the storm. And, also, in my case, the previous disasters were kind of economically good for us because we had more business because of the hurricane. We had more business because of the earthquakes, because there was a power outage, throughout the whole island. And since we have a generator, so we didn't economically struggle during those times. This is a different story. And so now, we're in new waters, kind of figuring out how we go. But, the aid is there, and we've been taking advantage of everything that we can.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Interesting. Kind of wrapping up a little bit and so forth. How do you, how do you see the economy kind of unfolding? You kind of have a heartbeat with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and what are you seeing people do that is maybe successful? Where you kind of see that direction?
So entrepreneurs, and that's a key factor. It's once you're a risk taker, once you are an entrepreneur, I think you can never stop being an entrepreneur. And I feel people are always looking for solutions. So I see every single one of our members, if they've had to change, if they've had to pivot, they're doing it, because there's no way where you can just say, oh, okay, well, this is not working, I guess it's going to die. No, even if one business dies, it's because you're starting then a completely new one. It's that mindset of just always finding the solution to a problem. And I think that with COVID, what I do see is the economy won't really take off until the virus is controlled, because no matter, if you keep everything open, people are not going to be so confident into spending money
Sure.
if everything is still. So I think, austerity measures are being held in every level, like on a personal level, on a corporate level. We're not spending money the way we used to. So the economy is being affected by that.
Yeah.
So I think right now the priority globally should be to focus on, putting a stop to this virus or slow it down so that the economy can fully, come back to where it used to be.
Got it. I know you have a heartbeat for wanting to help this island. You came back. I know, you've fought the good fight and so forth. Is there like a message that is like in your heart that you see that if people were to attach could like the change that maybe others are overlooking?
So we've been on a 15-year recession, and one of the main reasons for that is because the pharmaceutical industry died. And I think there's so much talent in Puerto Rico. There is so much potential here, but we can't keep focusing on big industries. We can't rely on the government. We need to rely on small businesses. That is the heartbeat of any big, strong economy, is small businesses. So that's why I kind of now truly believe in this coworking movement, because we're providing and facilitating small businesses to grow and scale. And I think once we have a good ecosystem of small businesses in Puerto Rico, we won't really be in a recession anymore. We don't need to then rely on the government so much. And so to really have financial independence as an island, like we need to just have a strong like small business foundation.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's critical. What could we do to accomplish that?
I think, to be honest, I think if anyone from the diaspora is interested in moving to Puerto Rico to start their, endeavor, now is the time. It's never been better, I think, to become an entrepreneur in Puerto Rico. The ecosystem right now is about to get even stronger. There's the SBIA grant for small business incubators and accelerator programs, which we're actually applying to. But even if we don't get it, like 10 to 14 industry, companies are going to get these grants, and that's just going to make the ecosystem even stronger. There's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of people that are looking to Puerto Rico as an example, and so it's not the easiest place to become a founder, but I think the upset is that when you make it, it's going to be that much more rewarding. And I think we are in this we need to show the world how like a small island that's constantly being bombarded by all these natural and human-made disasters can actually survive and become because the world is just going to keep getting harder, in my opinion. Global warming is real. So the weather is going to get stronger in different areas, and we're going to have to become, as humans, like a lot more resilient and kind of figure it out.
Got it.
Yeah,
it makes sense. Well, good. In closing, any other, things you want to leave people with or anything?
I don't know. Just follow your dreams. I think that's super important. That's how you can really then survive all the crazy stuff. Is like you have to be doing what you're absolutely passionate about. So if you are not happy and passionate about what you're doing right now, start finding whatever that is. And even if you're working it on the side at first, as a side hustle, that's the way to go.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's critical, especially right now. People have an opportunity to make that change.
Yeah.
They're not committed to what they're doing. So good. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I think this is, you have a beautiful space here if people haven't checked it out. And talk soon.
Come visit us. Thank you.
How can people find you?
Oh, yes. Our website is cocohaus.com, and Haus is actually the German version, so it's Haus. So cocohaus.com. And on social media, we're on pretty much every social media, and we are in Santurce, Puerto Rico, in the very middle of Santurce at Cobian's Plaza.
Amazing. So if you're watching, share, like, subscribe. If you want to hear other interviews, if you have suggestions on people we should interview, this is definitely meant to be kind of community driven and kind of like highlight people that are doing moving ahead in this time. And so we're this is meant to be like, I think every economy throughout the world right now should be highlighting the really backbone of people in their cities where they're at, and because it's the same solutions can be applied in other areas.
Absolutely.
as you're going to Banff and other places and learning. So appreciate you guys signing on, and we'll be talking soon. Another episode coming soon.